Hello again, everybody, and welcome to a WHAS 11 sports podcast. Whitney Harding and myself, Kent Spencer,
Sports.
Here to break down the upcoming Citrus Bowl against Penn State for the Kentucky Wildcats. It's a top 15 showdown down in Orlando at Camping World Stadium, a game you can see right here on WHAS 11. Kickoff is at 1 o'clock on New Year's Day. And Whitney, your thoughts just on the matchup itself for Kentucky. I mean, obviously they're having an historic season, sure. 9-3, their best season since 1977, but an opponent like Penn State.
I think it's a great matchup, to be honest with you. This is a team that they haven't seen this year, but they've seen teams that do very similar things. They're very stout up front defensively. They like to defend running the football, and they do things offensively as far as with their backfield, the combined running of the running backs and Trace McSorley, the quarterback. Very similar to Mississippi State. So I think that's a good thing for Kentucky.
You know, and if you think about that game against Mississippi State, you know, Kentucky, especially in the second half, they were able to handle the Bulldogs, who were ranked 14th in the country at the time. Eddie Grant, Kentucky's offensive coordinator, also compared Penn State's defense, at least, to South Carolina. Mm-hmm. And obviously in the first half in that game, Kentucky had a lot of success against the Gamecocks. It'll be interesting to see. You know, for me, I think for Kentucky, it all comes down to this. It all comes down to the offensive and defensive lines because Penn State's got some big boys.
Oh, yeah.
And they can play. And the one thing that I would say with Penn State's defense, if you look at it against the run, they are 71st in the country. So Kentucky should be able to have some success. Mm-hmm. But Penn State, they're really, really good in forcing tackles for loss. They're top 10 in the country.
Yes.
So I feel like the Nittany Lions kind of has that go for broke mentality on defense. I've watched them a couple times this season. That kind of
they wrap up and pull. they wrap up and pull. This is a team that's going to tackle well. They're very disciplined when they tackle. Something that's kind of a lost art, I think, in some ways in college football, is just being able to tackle well, not go for the hit, but wrap and pull. And so they're very, very good at that. And that's something Kentucky has talked about. But I think Kentucky's run game, if they can really get it cranking, and if Terry Wilson can play like he did in the last 2 games of the regular season, that's a huge push for Kentucky because obviously they can't just key in on Benny Snell. You know, Terry can take off and run. He can throw. We've seen him throw well. And I think C.J. Conrad is also going to be a big factor for Kentucky.
You're 100% right about Terry Wilson. I mean, look, the cat's out of the bag. He got hurt early in the season, and that completely threw him off.
Yes.
I'd say for about 5 or 6 weeks. I mean, he admitted to me that, hey, it was against Mississippi State in the second half of that game where Bunchy Stallings falls on his leg.
Yes.
And he sprains his knee. And he was, I mean, almost by on his own admission, he was garbage for about 5 to 6. And we say fancy because he was really, really bad.
Yeah, and it wasn't even just the leg that was the problem. It's when you get hurt, especially on a knee that you have to plant to take off or to throw, mentally there's always the question of, is it going to hold? Is it going to hold up? If I push down, is it going to hurt? Is that going to affect my throwing motion? So I think mentally more than anything, he was just doubting himself.
He kept on saying through that time, I'm just not trusting it. I'm just not trusting it. And I think most people, me included, to be honest with you, thought not trusting it was the fact that he couldn't make the decision and then go with it. And it was more, I don't think he trusted his body to be able to do what his mind was telling him he needed to do in that situation. And then in college football, especially the SEC, when you pause for 2 to 3 seconds, you're done.
They're going to get you.
Yeah, every time.
And especially when you're a dual threat quarterback like him, because they know if he's pausing, the odds he's going to take off are probably pretty good. Well, then he also said when we talked to him about that injury, I wasn't fast. He's like, I'm used to being fast. Even in practices here at Kentucky, I'm as fast as the DBs. I'm as fast as the wideouts, and I wasn't fast. And realizing that you're not as fast as you want to be, that is such a mind trip. If you're a dual threat quarterback like him. Like imagine if Lamar Jackson thought one day, I'm not fast. Whoa.
Yeah, and he looked fast against Middle Tennessee. I think that was kind of his breakout game. And then obviously Louisville. And I know, a lot of people are going to really kind of point to that game. And I think it was really good. I think Kentucky did exactly what they needed to do. But at the end of the year, especially, Louisville was really, really bad. So it's hard to have a true gauge. I really think that we're going to get to see, okay, this is what Terry Wilson has become against Penn State. And one thing I'll say about Kentucky's offensive line, they're going to have to be able to handle pressures because, like I said, Penn State's 71st against the run. So that means if you run right at them, you can have success.
Yeah.
But they also are going to sell out. They're going to bring pressure from all kinds of different angles, and that's something that Kentucky's going to have to handle.
And this is a Penn State team that has played well against some good teams. I mean, they've played poorly against some not so great teams, but I mean, they had Ohio State. I mean, they had the Buckeyes in that game, and then Ohio State, and
some questionable play calling down the end.
Questionable play calling, questionable time management, and Haskins just played great in the last 5 minutes. But he should. He was best quarterback in the Big Ten. So, but I mean, it's one of those things with Penn State where they've played well against good teams. And I think with Kentucky as well, and with Terry Wilson, the bowl practices, I think it's going to really show. We've seen so many players make a jump in those bowl practices. Again, I'm going to bring up Lamar Jackson, the year before the Music City Bowl, when he was his first starting his freshman year. He made such a jump.
Well, think about it. He was in and out of the starting lineup his entire freshman season, and the next thing you know, he became Lamar Jackson against Texas A&M in the Music City Bowl.
And Terry Wilson, I think with these extra practices, they've said they've worked on throwing the ball more. They know they're going to have to. I think that we could definitely see, not like a Lamar Jackson jump, because I think we've all realized now that no one is Lamar Jackson, but we can see an improvement along those lines within Terry Wilson's realm.
Yeah, and let's go on to the defensive side of the ball for Kentucky, and we'll get in a little bit of Penn State stuff here in a second. But I think for Kentucky's defense, the thing that I'm going to watch out for is no Jordan Jones.
Yes.
He's ineligible. Nobody knows exactly what he did, but it was something to make him ineligible for his career to officially come to an end at Kentucky. Stepping into his place are going to be two true freshmen, DeAndre Square and Chris Oates. Now, DeAndre Square won all SEC freshman. He was on the all SEC freshman team. Chris Oates, we've seen him at different times step in for Cash Daniel, play really well. So you like the upside of both of those players, but they're still not Jordan Jones, who's really, really good and is like a missile running around that defense. That's a hole that they're going to need to fill.
And he brings a meanness. He brings kind of that junkyard dog kind of mentality, which on the defensive side of the ball, Cash Daniel definitely has that. We all know he's got WWE coming his way eventually in life. But it's just one of those things with Jordan Jones. He's just mean. And you just go into when you're flying around out there, you kind of need those guys that are just mean.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, when you look at Penn State's offense, they're okay throwing the ball. They're not great. I think they're 77th in the country when it comes to throwing the football. Their bread is buttered on the run game.
Yes.
Much like Kentucky's is, and everything goes through Trace McSorley. He's second on the team in rushing, but he has over 800, 900 yards rushing. So he's almost on 1,000-yard rushing as a quarterback. And then you have their leading rusher, Miles Sanders, in the backfield, and he's explosive and he can do pretty much everything. And they can also get tough yards. So those two in the same backfield puts a lot of pressure on you, puts a lot of pressure on those freshman linebackers.
Especially with Trace McSorley, because, and we talk about Terry Wilson being a dual-threat quarterback. McSorley's very different. He will lower his shoulder, and he will just try to plow through. He's not going to go out to the edge and try to make you miss cutting that. No. He is going to lower that shoulder, plow through, and he's going to try to punish your inside linebackers and those kinds of guys, but you also have to honor him. So it's a very complicated kind of thing, because it's not the dual threat you're used to seeing.
McSorley's one of those kids that you just look at him and you're like, okay, how do you can't really put him in a box. You can't really define him. He's just a football player. His arm is good enough.
It's good enough.
He could throw. Is he a burner? Not really, but he can get up. He can get large chunks of yardage. He can make explosive plays. He's just a guy, to be quite honest, you want on your football team. And I think for Kentucky, I think the biggest thing is you just have to contain him. You're not going to stop him. No. You cannot stop him because everything goes through that offense. But if you can limit his explosive plays, then that's a big thing. Another thing for Kentucky is, I'm not 100% sure how effective, and this is going to sound crazy, how effective Josh Allen is going to be in this game, because everything that they do, whether it's in the passing game or whether it's in the running game, is quick.
Yes.
He doesn't hold the ball a long time back there. And, Allen eventually gets to his mark. A lot of times it's in the second half, but I think early on, I think that it could be frustrating for them a little bit defensively.
And I look back at that Mississippi State game again when he made that play in the end zone, when he reached up and he got that deflection. I think that might be kind of where he could be crucial if he can drop back and he can hold his own in some of those short yardage situations like that. Maybe that's where he could be crucial, but I agree. It's not it may not be as much of a pass rush situation. Maybe he gets him after a few yards. It is all about containing Trace McSorley, and it is going to be interesting to see how Josh Allen responds to that, which will show his growth as well.
Another guy you're going to want to watch out for Penn State is KJ Hamler. I would say this. I was thinking about KJ Hamler, and I was like, okay, is there a comparison for Kentucky? And I think it's Lynn Bowden. Hamler is more explosive than Bowden is in my mind. I think Bowden is a more consistent player at this point. But Hamler he can be a load.
Yes.
He can make, I mean, he could take it 80, he could take it 90 at a given moment. I mean, he's that explosive.
He's that explosive, and like we've been saying about a lot of these Penn State guys, it's hard to bring them down. I mean, these guys are just hard to bring down. They won't try to trip you with the footwork or things like that. They'll just plow through, and that's how they get those extra yards. That's what Benny Snell does. I mean, that's how they get those yards. After being hit, after being grabbed, is they just keep going. So I mean, Kentucky's gonna have to take a lesson from Penn State. Wrap and pull. You got to wrap and pull, wrap them up.
And a lot of things, when you look at Kentucky's defense, I mean, they're really good. I mean, obviously they're really, really good.
Yeah.
I think they're 8th in the country, scoring defense, but They'll give up some yards, but they kind of bow their necks a little bit once you cross that 50. And I think for Penn State and for Kentucky, I think that's exactly what the Cats were going to have to do, because Penn State's going to get yardage. It's maintaining that and maybe holding them to field goals and keeping that kind of limited. And obviously the turnover battle in this game is going to be so crucial for these teams. So
crucial, because it won't be that many. I don't really know if there will be that many turnovers. So if you get the one, I was going to say with Kentucky secondary, that's where I think they could be very crucial, because if you can make Trace McSorley throw one bad ball, if the front can do that maybe one or two times, I think Kentucky secondary can really attack that, really get after them in that way. Maybe bring somebody in from the secondary for that pass rush, because those guys are quick, and maybe that'll help out. I think the Kentucky secondary is going to be, to me, one of the biggest points for them in this game.
And for Kentucky, I mean, win, lose, or draw, this has already been a really, really good season for the Cats, but it has a chance to finish off, to make it truly special, because a win against Penn State would give them that 10th win.
Yep.
And they're not shy about saying they really want that 10th win. They want to hit double digits. And also, it would be, this is going to be their 4th bowl game in the history of the state of Florida. They've yet to win a bowl game in the state of Florida. The last time they played Penn State was in the 1999 Outback Bowl down in Tampa. So this is a little bit different being in Orlando. But you could tell, I mean, this team is really driven by that. And
we've seen what Mark Stoops has done with this program, and they've gotten better. I mean, I think this year was finally, they got over the edge where everybody's saying, okay, now we really see it. But there's the one thing they haven't done yet, and that's hoist that trophy at the end of the season. They went to, I think this is their 3rd bowl now under Mark Stoops. I think that's right. They haven't won one yet.
Yeah.
And so I think that is also big for them, too, is they want to say, okay, we can go play these other conferences and we can do well against them.
No, I think you're 100% right there. It's about finishing the job. And I think for this senior class that, so many guys came back for another run at this thing. And for Benny Snell, I mean, look, he's already declared for the NFL draft. He's off after this. He's 107 yards from breaking Sonny Collins' all-time rushing record at Kentucky. I mean, those guys want to walk off that field with a smile on their face, and I think they're definitely driven by that. How do you see this game playing out? Have you made? Let me ask you this, because we haven't talked.
No.
Have you made a prediction about this game?
I have not made a prediction yet. I mean, if I off the top of my head right now, and I'm going to keep talking as I'm stalling and trying to put numbers into my head, what I think it's, I don't think it's going to be a high scoring game, but I think there will be some offense. Right off the top of my head, I'm thinking maybe like 21-18 Kentucky, 21-14. I'm thinking somewhere in there. I mean, 24-21. It's somewhere in that. I do think Kentucky is going to pull it out. I think in the second half that defense is going to click. I think Josh Allen and those guys are going to figure it out a little bit. And I think that's where they're going to kind of wear them down.
It's so funny because when we actually walked into this booth right now, I was going to pick Penn State. I was. And then I started thinking about things. I started thinking about, Penn State against Michigan State and losing to Ohio State. And they're a good team. They're 9-3. They've put up a really good record. But Kentucky, they went down there and they beat a really good Florida team in the swamp when their quarterback was healthy.
Yes.
They took it to Mississippi State, albeit at Kroger Field, who was the 14th team in the country. Mississippi State is really, really good.
They are good. And
so I think, to be quite honest, I think Mississippi State and Florida are better than both of those teams, are better than Penn State. I mean, I'm just saying that out loud. So I don't have a score. I do think Kentucky's going to win. I think it's going to be close, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I want to remind you guys that you can see 15th ranked Kentucky versus 12th ranked Penn State in the Citrus Bowl at Camping World Stadium down in Orlando at 1 o'clock right here on WHAS 11 on New Year's Day. But how about this? We have a 2-hour pregame show, our Big Blue Nation Bowl special coming to you from Camping World Stadium. We've got a lot of great stories leading up to this thing. It starts at 11 a.m. Whitney has got a tremendous story with Terry Wilson and his battles throughout the course of the season. She's got John Schlarman, UK offensive line coach, battle with cancer. She did a great piece on Josh Allen and his why he came back, what's driving him, which I think is really, really good. I've done a story on Benny Snell. I've done a story on Josh Paschal. And his battle with cancer. It's crazy that this team has had a couple different battles with cancer throughout the course of the day. And we got to sit down with Mark Stoops. We've got guests like Mitch Barnhart, John Hale with the Courier-Journal coming on. Doug Proffitt has got a piece that literally I think will touch your heart coming into this thing. So we've got a lot of great things coming on that special. Plus, after the game, we've got an hour and a half post-game special with all the post-sound and the analysis and breakdowns of everything throughout the course of the game and everything that we saw in the Citrus Bowl. It should be a lot of fun.
It should be a lot of fun. Hopefully a trophy presentation on the field. Fingers crossed if you're a Kentucky fan, hopefully.
Yeah, so keep it right here on WHAS 11. Thank you for listening to our WHAS 11 Sports Podcast with Whitney Harding and Ken Spencer. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the game.